Listen, I'm gonna come right out and say it. This is the best vegan ham I've ever had. So there I was one day scrolling the internet when I was absolutely shocked by a photo of what I thought was meat. It turns out it was this guy named Kim's Pig Saver ham recipe, and after a few tries making it, I thought I'd share some of the changes I made to the recipe with you. So go ahead and dump one 5-pound bag, the whole thing, of flour into a giant mixing bowl, and into a separate container add 6 cups of cold water, and then mix 1/8 teaspoon or 0.8 milliliters of red dye. Pour your dyed water into the flour and use your hands to combine it into a cohesive dough, and then move to a work surface. Knead for 3 to 5 minutes or until fully combined. It should be relatively smooth and maybe a little tacky. Now, no rest for the weary here, as we're gonna dig right back in and make a second one. So dump in 1 more bag of flour, 6 cups cold water, except this time use 1/4 teaspoon or 0.85 milliliters of red dye. For reference, I'm using this brand, which I believe to be widely available in the US. If you use something different, your results might vary. Once both dough balls are created, cover in water and let rest for 1 hour. After these bad nannies are well rested, wake your little dough boy up from his nap and give him a little water massage. For those of you new to wash the flour, or WTF method, we're quote washing the starch out of the flour for each of these giant balls, so only the gluten itself is left. Gluten is what makes seitan seitan. That milky water is the starch separating from the protein, which is exactly what we want. After washing for 5 minutes, the water will be super milky white, and you can go ahead and drain. If making vegan cheese or vegan bacon out of starch is your thing, go ahead and save the first batch. I did 5 washings total. For the second, third, and fourth wash, you'll notice that the water gets progressively less and less milky. Each wash of mine took about 3 to 5 minutes. On the 4th wash, you should start to feel the gluten have a little squeak feel to it. That means you're on the right track. During the 5th and final wash, you'll want to make sure that there aren't any clumps of flour left in what otherwise should be pure gluten at this point. Those clumps look like this. When you see them, massage them out. There shouldn't be many of these little starch dudes hanging out in your dough at the end. At the end of the 5th wash, it should straight up look like a ball of red meat. By the way, if there's any food scientists out there that know why the red dye sticks to the gluten and not the starch, please let me know in the comments. I'm actually super curious about this. Now, the next step is to season the gluten, but before we do, we're gonna want these washed balls to drain thoroughly. So let it sit for another 30 minutes to an hour to dry out. While we wait, let's mix up some homemade smoke-infused salt. Pour 100 grams or about a half cup of kosher salt into a bowl and mix 30 grams or 2 tablespoons of liquid smoke to the salt. Mix and spread into a thin layer on a baking sheet. Pop that in a preheated oven at 170°F, 80°C, and turn it off. After 10 minutes, it should be dry and you should be able to easily break it apart with your hand. Easy peasy. To make the rest of the seasoning mix, depending on how salty you want it, combine 3/4 cup to 1/3 cup or about 70 to 100 grams of the smoked salt we just made, depending on how salty you want your ham. 1 tablespoon or 10 grams of MSG, 1/4 cup or 50 grams of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons or 20 grams of onion powder, and 1/4 cup or 50 grams of mushroom powder. These seasonings will work together like a smoked hammy A-team. Before we season, work the gluten for a few minutes to incorporate the 2 balls together. Do this by stretching and rolling them into each other. What we've done here is created 2 slightly different colored ham balls so that when we combine them, it mimics the grain of animal-based ham. Let them rest for 10 to 15 minutes, and then it's seasoning time. And to do this, you really need to get on in there. Aggressively stretch the gluten and rub in generous amounts of the seasoning mix. Then fold it over the seasoned area and repeat that process until you have no seasonings left. Don't worry if the strands don't come back together right away. The gluten will form back together as it cooks. In hindsight, I wish I had let my gluten rest for longer, as it was still oozing water as I needed, which left a lot of the seasoning on the cutting board. However, the ham actually still turned out with amazing flavor. I then kneaded vegan butter into the gluten per the recipe. I tried to nestle as much butter in there as I could to make little pockets of butter to mimic the fat deposits in the final product. Now, this is the final step in the kneading process. Knot the roast the best you can into a ball. If you need to, you can tuck the ends into each other. Just try to get it into as cohesive as a ball as you possibly can. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Now place the ball into a clean cheesecloth and then burrito wrap that roast the best you can into a tight ball. I used 2 of my square-sized cheesecloths. The tighter the cloth, the more dense the ham is going to be, and the better the gluten will form back together. Now that that's all wrapped up, to cook this, we're gonna need to make a brine. So fill your Dutch oven or Instant Pot halfway with water and then stir in 1/4 cup or 60 grams of salt, a healthy glug of soy sauce, and about a tablespoon of browning liquid. The water should be pretty dark. This will help give the outside of the roast a nice color contrast from the inside. Now gently set sail to your little ham boy. Add more water if you need to cover the roast. and close the lid. Set the ham to the slow cook function for 4 hours in the Instant Pot. After it is cooked and cooled to room temp, let rest for at least 8 hours. Now let's unwrap this thing. You should end up with a dense, dark seitan roast. Before we cut into this thing to check it out, we've got one more step to make it perfect, the maple smoked glaze. Whisk together 1/4 cup of maple syrup, 1/4 cup of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon of liquid smoke flavoring, 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, make sure it's vegan, an 1/8 teaspoon of ground cloves. Put the ham on top of a pan and generously coat it with half of the glaze so that all the nooks and crannies are covered. Roast in the oven for 30 minutes. And at the 15-minute mark, take it out and put another set of glaze on. Use the rest of it and put it back in the oven. The goal of the roast is for the sugars to caramelize and give a nice deep dark finish to the ham. So this is what you should end up with, a beautiful succulent roast, juicy and full of flavor. It tastes super juicy, smoky, and salty, exactly how I remember ham. Check out that texture. Eat on its own as a roast for the holidays, make vegan ham and cheese sandos, put it in stews and salads with pineapples on pizza if that is your thing. And Kim, if you're watching, thank you so much for this recipe. It is absolutely incredible. Please go make sure to check out his channel. I've linked it below. It's called Crazy Asian Meets Vegetation. This super versatile ham reminds me actually a ton of my shredded chicken seitan episode, which can also be used for tons of amazing recipes from tacos to burgers. You can watch that all here. And until next time, y'all, be nice to each other and keep cooking.